aspects together, how do you think that we can address that problem in Africa? Do you think that it should be a problem dealt with by the African countries themselves because of the dimension? Or do you think that the foreign aid can help address those social aspects? When we're talking about diets, I'm sure that in your country, I know that in mine, some of the crops are no longer farmed because of the new dimension. We are grown up, we have education, and we don't want to eat those things anymore. So that's a kind of a specific problem and social aspect in the countries. I don't know if we are expecting, foreign aid to address those issues. I just want your take on that. Thank you.
Is your question directed to the whole panel or just to Dr. McIntosh? Dr. McIntosh, you're getting the questions here.
Yes, it just shows you that the paradigm is shifting to Africa.
Yes.
No, but I agree with you. There's this. That's why in my comment I said the debate is not a new debate. I said what is new was basically the elements and the focus around which this debate goes, particularly when it comes to the availability of opportunities. What you just said is giving a line of example to that proposition that I put on the table. Now, we talk about technology. You see, we have seen countries where they have less land, and yet they produce so much. In this country here, they started with big farms and many farmers, and then there's this trade-off between moving into other spheres of development and let the farm become effective. Technology. And we have to shift. We have to shift. So I agree with you in the sense that at the moment, we seem to have a full crisis, but given the land we have, given the sun, the water, we should be able to have a breadbasket. Now, so my only advice to all of us from Africa is in this shift that we are talking about, we should be worried about technology, and again, it's a very expensive commodity, and it calls for collaboration, not amongst ourselves, but with the outside world. Now, the question of socio-economic crisis you talk about, I was making the point that this shift, the debate in the shift, is moving from social economic crisis. And you're right, because that's just a small component of development. You want to build the kinds of infrastructure, institutional infrastructure, which includes, in my mind, processes, rules, regulations, and so forth. You want to build that kind of process in a developmental context that brings social, economic, political, those dimensions of development. That is the point I was making. So while the debate was going around social, something was let loose. Political was going bad. And when you make one step, you make 2 steps forward, you come 3 steps backward because you did not build the political institutions.
Thank you. As we start another round of questions, we're going to go over here for just one moment. If you do want to ask a question, please try to find the person with the microphone and get their attention, and they'll be moving back and forth because I'm just going to move between the questions. We have one up here. And the second thing I want to say is if we have a question of the 3 that are out there now that is specifically for Anne Marie Slaughter, I'd like to take that before she has to leave. Is there a question that you specifically would like her to address? This one, yes? Or this one? Let me start with this one over here.
You can collect a few.
What? Yeah, we could also combine a couple. I'll take this one and that one. And one here. All right, we'll take 3 of them.
This is Bruce White from Catholic Relief Services. This is for Anne-Marie. Some of us in the community really look at development through a rights-based approach. And I was wondering to what degree the administration is really picking this up and folding it into its kind of new paradigm or whatever.
Okay, a question over here, and then we have one up front here for Ms. Slaughter here. Is that also back there for her? But let's take this one right up here because it is, I know, for her. But we'll take this one over here second, and then we're going to have her answer. Go ahead.
Hi, my My name is Tosei Sen. I'm from IBI International, an economic growth consulting firm in Virginia. My question is for Dr. Slaughter. We spent most of the morning talking about private sector-led growth, job creation, and what have you. And in speaking about the new development strategy, you mentioned being good and being leaders in certain sectors. Where exactly do you see the private sector in this new development, or in the administration's new development strategy?
Good. We'll take one up here, and then we will go back to that table back there.
Thank you. I'm Joan Dudick-Gayoso. I'm on the SID board. And,
right up close, please.
Can you hear?
Yeah, no.
Okay, I'm Joan Gayoso from the SID board. Ms. Slaughter, when you were here last year, we had a panel discussion on, and got unforgettable answers from you. They were wonderful. But we had a panel discussion on the interaction between development practitioners and the Defense Department, people who are abroad. 1 year has gone by. I personally was pretty disappointed in the outcome, which was basically USAID is trying to figure out how to make this work. The Defense Department is trying to figure out how to make this work. That's what we heard a year ago. This morning we saw a clip that made us wonder if we've gotten any progress. So I wonder what the State Department thinks about this relationship in situations where we have both defense and development people abroad. My other question on the new paradigm has to do with the investments that are being made by China and India, for example, in countries to use their land in Africa to produce agricultural commodities for export against future food shortages. But that can wait, but I'll probably only get one shot at the mic, so I figured I'd ask both questions. Thank you.
Okay, we've got 3 questions definitely are for Dr. Slaughter, and then we'll go back to that table after she answers these 3 questions. We'll go back there.
3 very good questions, and I must say admirably succinct. I hope I can be that succinct in response. On rights-based development, Secretary Clinton gave a speech at Georgetown in December where she talked about the fundamental links, in our view, between development, democracy, and human rights. And specifically what she meant was, as we look at our human rights policies, we want to put as much emphasis on the ability of individuals to exercise their civil and political rights as the civil and political rights themselves. Effectively, she made the point that for people who can't eat, for people who are not educated, for people who are sick, they may have the ability to speak or to assemble or access to justice, any of the traditional civil and political rights, but they're not meaningful to them. So from that point of view, our human rights policy and our development policy are very closely tied, and the third part of that is the empirical evidence and the commitment to promote democracy and open society as the best overall way to get both development and human rights together. It's not clear to me that is exactly what people mean by rights-based development. I mean, in other words, there are many different paradigms, and I think we're going to have to wait for Administrator Shah to get a little further in USAID to see the extent to which on the ground and in the way he's building USAID, they're actually, for instance, focusing on access to justice, the DeSoto-Albright report, some of the more specific paradigms of rights-based development. But I can say overall we are very open to that model, and I know if Assistant Secretary Posner were here, he would endorse that as well. On the private sector, and development, this is something we completely embrace. There's an entire task force in the QDDR specifically on public-private partnerships, and it is tasked with going beyond the rhetoric of public-private partnerships. USAID, of course, has been doing this very effectively for a while, so in many ways the State Department is just catching up. I do think, though, there's a sense in the private sector that the government is missing many opportunities because we are not organized as efficiently as we might be. That's not just within USAID or state, it's also across government, and here again is a place where we've been working with the White House to figure out how can you reach as many different private sector organizations or corporations as you can, and how do you make the most of what they can contribute. I'm just going to give you one model because it was just announced this week, and I actually think it has a lot of potential. It wasn't in the context specifically of development, it was the context of following up on the President's Cairo speech. But Secretary Clinton announced the Partners for a New Beginning, which is going to be chaired by former Secretary Albright and co-chaired by Walter Isaacson, the head of the Aspen Institute, and Muhtar Kent, the CEO of Coke. The goal of those three people will chair a committee of CEOs, heads of universities, heads of NGOs, prominent Americans from across multiple sectors. And their purpose is to take all the places where we're investing as a follow-up to Cairo, much of which is connected to development in terms of science and technology, vocational education, entrepreneurship. And the point of the committee is to make it clear what the government is doing and facilitate the ability of private sector actors to either co-invest or invest in parallel to maximize or to multiply the effect of our investments. Now that is a model that's a little different than a specific partnership with a particular company, but it's a model that it seems to me if you were focusing on a number of specific development projects and you were to create those kind of committees, again, you'd get a much broader reach. Final question. I said to Betsy Basson as I came up here that I'm always coming up and speaking before I'm allowed to say anything because, of course, the PSD's not done and the QDDR's not done. And last year you asked me when we were going to have a USAID administrator. Well, I'm happy to say I have an answer to that question. That's a long prologue to saying I don't have a good answer to your question in that we do think we've made progress in Afghanistan in terms of how in civilian-military relations. There's a better framework. We think we're doing better. That is, of course, an ongoing trial, and we're trying to learn from what's right and what's not right. I don't think we yet have, and that's why I say I have to keep saying we're working on it, a larger set of principles governing civilian-military relations, and particularly in the key areas of security sector assistance, where on the one hand, there's some areas of security sector assistance where you need soldiers, you need the security they provide. On the other hand, and Secretary Gates would agree with this, there must be a civilian face, and that we haven't, we recognize the principles, but we don't have it yet worked out in practice.
Dr. Slaughter, thank you very much. I know you're going to have to leave in just a...
I've got time for one more question.
One more question. Let me see if we have one more question back there that might be directed to her that she might partially answer. Yes, sir. We got three hands all in the same area there.
That's right. There's a lot of competition. My name is Bruce Moore, and I'm with the SID chapter from Ottawa, Canada. My question is in the context of new players. And my question is, what level of significance do you ascribe to the rise of philanthrocapitalism, such as the Gates Foundation and the Omidyar Network? And in particular, are they influencing the debate and the shaping of new paradigms as we're looking at them today?
Good. I think that one we'd like all the panelists to comment on that, but we'll let Dr. Slaughter do. Okay, you want to start, or you want to wait and hear?
I'll end. Why don't we?
Okay, Kong Ha, why don't you, if you would? Later. Dr. McIntosh.
What am I supposed to say? Later?
You go and then I'll go.
Well, first I was trying to, because I thought when he started off, he focused who was going to answer, so I don't think I gather, much out of what was said. But if I understood you, you were worried about the how will we coordinate those various groups that are worried about
The role of philanthrocapitalism.
yes, the role of
Philanthrocapitalism.
yes. Wow. Because the word philanthropy, I was reading one of the papers before I came here, or maybe in my other meeting I went in, I looked at it very hard. And I tried to figure out what does that mean. And before I go to the question, I don't know really. Maybe you can help us, Chairman, because is somebody doing something from with no tag attached. So I don't think I buy that easily. Now, having said that, I'm hoping, if I really understood what you're saying, is that how do we get these various groups to work together? Earlier, someone spoke, I think it was a chairman or someone spoke about the number of actors on the ground. And the capacity on the ground, that's my perspective on this, the capacity on the ground to absorb those various actors. If those capacities are low, then you have a problem, because they will be coming from one direction. In other words, when you go to a very small country, there's no capacity there, and then you get the Bill Gates, you get the Ford Foundation, you got the Strokes Foundation, you got the Phelps, whatever it is, everybody coming in on mission, and they come in with a program. And you do not understand even the complexities of that program, neither the elements in the program. And as the result, it is not internalized. So it cannot be sustained. So my own thing, perhaps if you're talking about collaboration, I agree with you. I think we need to find a mechanism in this new paradigm how to effectively do that. Not only dealing with countries with low capacities, but just amongst themselves, minimizing cost and waste, which I think is often the case. Now I can pass it here or pass it here.
Let me just, if I might, just perhaps rephrase the question a little bit for the last two speakers. Do the philanthropists who make their money from capitalism, as you call them, the capital philanthropists, such as Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or George Soros, who, and in the past, we, of course, had the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, a little more domestically oriented. But to those very large foundations like that have been created, have a responsibility that is different than others because they have made their fortunes from the world and global economies.
Well, as I mentioned, the global philanthropies give the new challenges because they have their own priorities or their modalities. But we need to think about coordination. But today's coordination is quite a difficult challenge. Today's aid architecture is not a building with carefully coordinated beams and columns. Something like the ecosystem built of networks. So it is too decentralized. So I think in order to enable coordination and leverage the return to scale, connections between networks should be more coherent. And this requires increased share of information. So I would like to emphasize the sharing, information sharing between networks in philanthropies and private corporations and emerging donors. So first of all, we need to develop some new mechanism for information sharing, and that is, I think, the important first step to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Slaughter, and then we'll let you be on your way.
I'm truly going to give you an answer and run. As I understood the question, you were asking about philanthrocapitalism, which to me means what Jacqueline Novogratz wrote about in The Blue Sweater, the idea of using philanthropy the way a private equity firm would, which is to really invest in what she calls patient capital. So you are investing, you're not giving, you're investing, and it is a business model, a regular business model, hence the capitalism, but it's going to take a longer time to show returns, and you have to engage very intensively with your entrepreneur to help him or her overcome the challenges of operating in developing countries. And her examples are selling water in India and a number of good examples. Secretary Clinton, I know, has read The Blue Sweater and mentioned philanthrocapitalism in her in her Georgetown speech, and I'm not suggesting the Acumen Fund is the only place that does it. We're very supportive. I think it, again, it's very consistent with the President's Summit on Entrepreneurship this week. We've got a global entrepreneurship program at the State Department that is, again, aimed not only at saying, you know, this is a good thing, we support it, but how can we facilitate it as a government? We have the ability often to connect young philanthro-capitalists to other sources of funds. We have ways we can use diplomacy to help create a better environment. It's, again, a model for diplomacy and development that takes account of the many different actors and then thinks, what can we do to facilitate what others are doing, rather than what can we do ourselves, or what do we do ourselves differently, which allows me to leave where I started, which is often, I think, in this landscape, the best thing we can do is to learn what others are doing and find out ways to help them do it better. Thank you.
Thank you, and let's thank Dr. Slaughter for her time today. Thank you very much. Okay, do we have a question over on this side? Where's my microphone over on this corner here? Oh, there it is. Do you have one here? All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Allison Johnson, and I'm here with Northrop Grumman Corporation. And I would like to ask the panel to address the issue of increasing the percentage of international development or foreign assistance across the world. We have already comments about how the Marshall Plan is not possible because of the tremendous amount of capital that would be required. But the One campaign has been urging even just 1%, for instance, in the case of the US of A. Where do you see the future in terms of increasing the level of development assistance as you see the emergence of new players? Mr. Park spoke about these different tiers of development donors. Are we going to get to that point where 1% is possible for all OECD countries? Thank you.
Let me collect a couple of questions, if you would just make a note of those. And I know we've got one here, I think, still in the center. Yes? Do we have a question there? No? Thought we had. Do we have a question over on this side? Okay. Where is it? There we are. You have a question. Microphone up here to the front. Go ahead, back there.
Yeah. Hi. Peter Goldstein from Intermedia. This is a question mainly for Mr. Park, but for both gentlemen. Mr. Park, you outlined the emergence of the new players in the development field and the very large role that they're playing. I wondered if you could comment a little bit on the degree of pushback that the traditional players are getting from developing countries in terms of conditionality or principles that we try to bring with our aid, and the ways in which the traditional development donors are grappling with this issue, and to what extent it's impacting policies. Thank you.
And we'll take this question up here, and then I'll go to our panel for a response.
My name is Werner Kiene. I'm on the board of SID, but in my work I have recently spent quite some energies on social environmental safeguards, and that gets me now in relation also to the question before. Mr. McIntosh talked about one size doesn't fit all. But then I hear also from Mr. Park this multi-tier or two-tier approach, something which I don't quite understand. And I have a question to both of you. Now, would Mr. McIntosh, if he were back home, accept essentially two tiers, talking in terms of adherence to some of these agreed upon standards in different ways? Is this acceptable to you? And to Mr. Park, what is it that the two tiers would differ in? Do they differ in terms of adherence to certain standards? And we now have a big debate when we listen to what's going on in some countries in Africa. There's this fear that the Chinese do things in a much different way, referring to environmental or social standards, than the others. Is this a problem, or is this just something that is made up as a problem?
Thank you. Let's start with Dr. McIntosh, if that's all right.
I'm afraid, Chair, the second question that came out, I was trying to pick it up, I missed it, and perhaps I'll skip it, and if my colleague here understood it, he can answer it. But let me talk about the prospects. The first question was, what are the prospects of this international assistance? How do I see, or how do, one will go about evaluating whether it looks brighter than it was some years back and moving forward? Once upon a time, I thought about this, and I wanted to discuss it from another angle, and I was saying, suppose I was the United States, and some years ago, I assisted country A, and then country A comes along and begin to challenge me seriously on the international market, and my domestic activities begin to dwindle in relation to this person that I train. It happened, The Marshall Plan we talked about, the assistance that were given to Japan after the war, or even to the whole Asian bloc. And so now we see all of these things happening. And so what would be my response? Would I drag my feet? If you look at the commitment that was made by the international community and countries, putting up 7% of the GDP, and they are going to come and help raise this kind of money to redo the world somewhere in Africa, that hasn't happened. So the needs, that's the question I'm answering now, the need for resources actually not being matched by the supply side. And as a result, I don't know whether we will see the prospects, especially after this crisis. We hope that we can see it. I know from the bank side, now I can speak on that side, efforts have been made to make sure that we upskill our resources, and there are progress from this last week. And when we do that, we upskill that. Now, the sandals, they agree upon sandals. If you go in the store and you wanted to buy a size 8 pair of shoes, there are a number of people that can buy the same size. There are certain people who will just have size 7 and size 2. And so if I'm dealing with the person who wears size 7, I would not be talking about the conditionalities and the issues of somebody who wears size 8. That is a phenomenon. That is a real life. And there's nothing much we can do about it.
Spark.
Yes, thank you. Regarding first question, traditional donors have the ODA to GNI target 0.7%. But they are trying to reach that level. But still, there are many traditional donors which do not achieve that goal. So I think it will take time for traditional donors to reach 0.7% target. However, as I mentioned, the emerging donors are providing at a remarkable rate much more ODA. So my point is that we need to engage them in our the agenda setting and give them some flexibility in the application of guidelines so that they could contribute more responsibly to the international development. So, for example, we could think about encouraging emerging donors to make their own ODA target. For example, 0.1% or 0.2%. As far as I understand, China is already around 0.1%. So my point is that we need to encourage emerging donors to engage in providing more ODA. And the second question is, traditional donors and emerging donors have a similar policy and also a different policy. So we need to learn. We need to learn the positive aspects from emerging donors, and we can mutually learn from each other. For example, emerging donors impose no policy condition. However, the emerging donors have a lot of do a lot of tied aid. So regarding negative effects, we need to encourage the emerging donors to improve their aid policy. Lastly, as I mentioned, my point is not the separate standards. We have the Paris Declaration. Paris Declaration principles is quite excellent guidelines. So we need to maintain the guidelines. But emerging donors cannot or will not abide by the guidelines. They have a different definition. They have a different practice. So we need to think about minimum standards, which all donors, including traditional donors and private and emerging donors, can accept. So step by step, we could, emerging donors and private donors, to improve their aid practice to the golden level. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think we've reached the end of our time for this panel, but I think it's been obvious both from the comments of all three of our panelists and from the questions that there's a lot of grappling going on with these new paradigms and where we should go as a society, as a world, in the global world, and certainly in the development community. But I think we've shed a good deal of light on it, and I want to thank our panelists for their contributions, and I ask you to join me in saying thank you to all of them. Thank you for your good questions, and it's back to Betsy.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. This was a fantastic panel, and a big thank you, Jim, dedicated SID board member, to our panelists. Thank you very much. Now we're going to turn, and I know that this is between you and the reception across the hall, so we won't take too much time, but we hope that you will all hang in there with us for a few minutes. We're pretty excited. We are going to be giving our first annual media award, and one that we think will be widely sought after from here. And of course, that really is our intent, to attract more and better coverage of international development. Maybe the Pulitzer of International Development one day. I'm sure that many of you in this room has at one time and possibly many times been frustrated by the lack of media coverage and therefore low public understanding on international development. Now, more than ever, with the world's eye on what we do, it's important to accurately capture it. To address this, the SID board decided to initiate a media award and in that way incentivize more and better coverage of international development issues. Board member and interim dean of Georgetown School of Foreign Service, Carol Lancaster, volunteered to lead the effort and was joined by board member Malcolm Butler, and I know he's somewhere in the room, also SID-Washington staffers Joe Foyer and Stacy Whittle. Hats off to them for working out all of the details associated with launching a new award and in selecting a very, very fitting recipient of our inaugural award. And that would be Dr. Moises Naim, who is editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine. He relaunched what is now one of the world's leading publications on international affairs, and he was the winner of the 2003 and 2007 National Magazine Award for General Excellence. Foreign policy circulates in 161 countries and is simultaneously published in 12 languages. Dr. Naeem has written extensively on international politics and economic development, especially about the unintended consequences of globalization. He has authored many books. His most recent is Illicit: How Smuggler, Traffickers, and Copycats Are Hijacking the Global Economy. It was selected by the Washington Post as one of the best books of the year and has been translated into 18 languages. Moises Naeem previously served as an executive director at the World Bank and was Venezuela's Minister of Trade and Industry in the early 1990s. He's a frequent commentator on US, European, and Latin American radio and TV. He has a Sunday column that is featured in more than 40 leading newspapers worldwide. He holds a Master's of Science and a PhD from MIT. Great. Dr. Naeem, it is my pleasure to give you this award on behalf of SID-Washington for your leadership in drawing attention to international development. And I have to tell you, this could easily fall out of the box, which we would not want to have happen. So let's just move a little bit this direction so everyone can see this really beautiful award. Okay, what do you think? Dr. Naeem is going to give us a few comments, and we're going to leave this right here. I think it'll stay in the box. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Betsy, and indeed a beautiful award. Thank you very much, and I am now even more conscious that I don't have too much time because it can fall at any moment. It is, of course, I'm delighted. This is a great honor for me to get this award from Society of International Development, the Washington chapter. Thank you to the board of directors, to the judges, to Carol Lancaster, and others who created this honor for me. I don't have a long speech, and I think you had a very rich day of discussions and conversations, and I just don't want to prolong it. But inevitably, this brings the award and the intersection of media and development, which is a place where I have spent a long part of my professional career, is the essence of this award. And in an audience like this, I don't need to dwell on the dense, rich, varied links and between information and media and development. You have seen it all. You have seen how the media can be an accelerator of important and good changes, and how the media can be also an inhibitor of the kind of reforms and changes that you all fight for. The examples are multiple and many. I always have in my mind one of the most powerful examples, and one that for me epitomizes the intersection of media and development, and that is an example given by Amartya Sen, the Indian economist and Nobel Prize winner, who wrote a book actually wondering why was it that famines in China generated so many more, effectively millions of people dying, whereas in his native India, famines did not got to that level of millions of people dying. And the answer, after looking at different possibilities in a quite systematic and rigorous way, was what you can imagine, and that is information. India is, and information in the case of India is a function of democracy, a democracy that, as in many other places, is imperfect and in many ways not what it ought to be, but in many powerful ways brings the best that democracies can bring to a society, and that is the free flow of information. And so India, millions of people in India did not die thanks to information, whereas millions of people in China died because that society did not have the free flow of information that allowed authorities to get timely, effective information about what was happening around the country with the distribution channels, the agricultural distribution channels for food and the agricultural produce and agricultural development and all that. So that's a very powerful example that I think it says all. We're talking about how information can save the life of millions or condemn millions to unnecessary and untimely deaths. When one thinks about that, then we know that the information is at the core of your profession. One way of looking at what you do every day is a fight against societal learning disabilities. You are fighters against learning disabilities that societies, organizations, and groups have. That is the inability of some groups, some societies, some countries to learn from their own experience or to learn from experience elsewhere. You are constant. When you go to a country, go to an organization, go to an institution, an agency or state, and try to bring the best of your knowledge, what you're trying to do, in effect, is to fight and try to compensate the propensity of so many organizations to be learning disabled, to having big blocks in their ability to process information in a way that will yield better decisions and more effective interventions. And that's what I think is at the core of, perhaps not phrased in that way, but is at the core of what the Society for International Development also is, and what you all do as practitioners in this profession. And there, of course, the role of media, the role of information in battling, in combating, compensating social, large-scale learning disabilities is very important. It's information providers, is disseminators of good practices, is the understanding of what works and what doesn't, what really makes a difference. That's an area that has had profound changes, as you all know, in the last even 5 years. If we would have this conversation in 1998, for example, I would not be talking to you about Google and the impact that Google did not exist in 1998, 12 years ago. And even more recently, we would not be talking about YouTube. And you all know the consequences that YouTube and Google and Facebook and Flickr, and all of these strange names that did not exist even a few years ago are having in your profession, and are having in your clients, and are having in the way that development is interpreted and the possibilities that it has opened. And so we are in a completely new territory that many, including practitioners like us, don't quite understand, among other reasons because it changes every month. And when we think that we understood consumer behavior in the world of information, we just discovered that both consumers and the technology that they use have moved, and that we need to find different ways of communicating and relating both to the technologies and to the users of the information. That generates all sorts of great opportunities, but as you well know, it also generates noise, confusion, saturation, and the overwhelming situation in which we all spend the day scratching our heads and trying to decide how are we going to avoid being overtaken by the tsunami of information that we get, and how do we deal with not knowing if what we're reading is true, if we, how do you sift between interested, biased, and tendentious information that sounds and is packaged as reliable from the real information that you need to have. It is in that sense that we all need, and we will continue to need, Sherpas, people, good guides, good editors, good reliable organizations. I believe that Foreign Policy magazine, where I have spent 14 years, is a reliable Sherpa, is a place that you can go and know that we are providing the best information available to our judgment without the biases of ideology, interest, or others. And that is only one of the many organizations that one can think that try to compensate for the noise and the distortions that accompany the explosion in information and opportunities that we have had. So being a reliable Sherpa is what will ensure, and having a proliferation of reliable Sherpas and guides that can take us and navigate through the sea of information that we now have is a very important function. And I just want to recognize and thank you for this award, and I interpret it to be an award for my role as a Sherpa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to carefully close this box and give this to you. Thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this has been an incredible day, and I want to thank all of you for coming, for your rapt listening, your participation, your great questions. Thank you very much. I also want to thank the many, many people who helped to organize this and to help this make this such a success. Too many to thank, but you know who you are, and thank you very much. Before you rush across the hall to the wine and cheese reception, which is directly across the hall, in the Ambassador Ballroom, please take a quick minute and fill out this evaluation form. It's very, very clear what it is because it has your drink tickets on it. And be sure to take those drink tickets off before you leave the evaluation form, and then you can take them across the hall and have your first drink on SID. We are delighted to give you that first drink. Again, thank you all for coming. Please go and enjoy yourselves at the reception. Thank you very much.